President Biden has said he's not ready to lift sanctions on Iran until the country gets back to its commitments under the 2015 nuclear deal. However, Iran's supreme leader is saying it's the U.S. that needs to act first.
If they want Iran to return to its commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, America must completely lift the sanctions. Not just with words or on paper. They just can't say we have lifted the sanctions. No, they must actually lift the sanctions, and we have to verify this.
Will the U.S. lift sanctions first in order to get Iran back to the negotiating table?
No.
The Iran nuclear deal was struck 5 years ago by Tehran, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and Germany. It followed years of complex talks and Western allegations that Iran was secretly developing nuclear weapons, a claim it has always and repeatedly denied. The result was the lifting of most sanctions against Iran, based on its commitment to limit uranium enrichment and allow inspections. But in 2018, the Trump administration unilaterally pulled out of the deal. And last month, Iran confirmed that it's resumed uranium enrichment to 20% purity, above the level set in the nuclear pact. I'm happy to say we can speak live in the programme now to Syed Mohammed Morandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Hello. Iran's going to have to deal with this new US administration for at least the next 4 years, Syed. At some point, does pragmatism come in? Is your country going to have to compromise, perhaps give a little to get a lot?
No, the Iranians are not going to appease Biden. They didn't appease Trump, and they won't appease Biden. The Iranians already gave much more than enough. The nuclear deal, or the JCPOA, was a deal where both sides gave something, and Iran gave quite a lot. In fact, many in Iran believe it was a bad deal. But regardless of whether it was a bad deal or a good deal, Obama, his administration, which included Biden, they signed on to the deal. So unless the United States commits itself to what it has promised to do, unless it carries out its obligations, then there's no deal. It doesn't make sense. Appeasing the United States will only make the regime in Washington more demanding. Iran, for 4 years, it resisted Trump because the Iranians knew that if it appeased Trump, then every time he wants something new from Iran, he'll impose new sanctions, or he'll reverse the sanctions. Now, what is happening now is that Biden wants to use Trump's sanctions as leverage to gain more concessions from Iran. Iran won't accept that. It's impossible.
Biden's core demand, though, is that Iran stop enriching uranium beyond the limit set in the nuclear deal, 20%. Why is that so hard to comply with, then?
Well, the Americans have a very short memory, collectively speaking. The lady asked, if they can bring Iran back to the table. It wasn't Iran that left the negotiating table. It was the United States that left. It wasn't Iran that stopped implementing the deal. It was the United States that stopped it. And under Obama, the United States, by the way, never implemented the deal. This is another issue for Iran. Under Obama, the United States did not implement the deal. When the agreement was signed, the Iranians immediately went and abided by all its commitments. And I think that was probably a mistake, because the Americans began dragging their feet. And until the very final day when Obama was in office, the United States had not implemented its side of the bargain. It only implemented bits and pieces. So now what the Iranians are saying is that you left the table, we abided by the deal, the Europeans obeyed you Americans, imposed sanctions, violated the deal. The Iranians continued to implement the deal for a full year, and then gradually Iran began to decrease its commitments in order to put pressure on the other side. Now the Iranians are saying, you hurt us. You punish the Iranian people who were abiding by the commitment. You have to make up for it. And so this time around, the Iranians are saying, you have to come back, implement the deal, abide by your commitments. and only then
Okay.
can we sit down and talk. If the United States abides by its commitments, then the Iranians will abide by theirs.
It's the practicality, though, isn't it, that really needs to get done at this stage? Because we had Foreign Minister Mohammed Javad Zarif saying the EU could play a mediating role in the dispute with the US over really who needs to act first. Could that be a solution?
Not really, no. I mean, I think Dr. Zarif was being polite to the interviewer and trying to say that the Europeans could try something. But the Europeans are part of the problem. When Trump was empowered, when he was in power, they obeyed Trump. Even though they grumbled, they imposed sanctions on Iran. They carried out all of the sanctions that Trump wanted them to do. They did nothing for the deal. They violated the deal just as much as the United States. Pretty words are useless. When the United States prevents Iranians from importing masks, importing ventilators, importing test kits, importing vaccines, and or even importing the machines they need to produce their own vaccines, this is a regime that has no moral boundaries. And the Europeans
just
worked
in
with
Iran
the United
itself,
States to carry out those sanctions.
how much of an urgency is there to actually get the dispute resolved?
Well, the Iranians want the problem to be solved, but there's not a dispute. Iranians know that the Iranian government did what it had to do. It signed an agreement with the United States and the P5+1. The Iranians gave concessions. Now, and Biden was a part of that administration. Now Biden is behaving like a godfather. He wants to get new concessions, and that's not going to work because the Iranians know very well that if you start appeasing the Americans, they will only demand more and more, and that is a very dangerous, slippery slope. So the Iranians are saying, you stick with the deal, abide by the deal, we abide by the deal. But we're not going down the road of appeasement. Appeasement is a very dangerous road to take, as people in 1939 found out to their detriment. So if the United States wants the deal to work, they abide by it, Iran will abide by it. But that era is finished. The Iranians know that the United States has so many problems at home with all the divides at home, economic, political, class, racial, and the United States is facing powerful adversaries who are growing more powerful by the day as the U.S. economy lags.
We're right out of time. Syed, thank you very much, though, for coming on the programme and sharing your views. Syed Mohammed Morandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran.
Thank you.